I think of pop culture as American subculture. Not only American, pop culture is now worldwide. Did you know that there's now a Comic-Con in every country, including Saudi Arabia? And I think most states in the United States have at least one Comic-Con as well. So Comic-Con is a convention, a conference where people get together and they sometimes dress up as their favorite comic book characters and they talk about their favorite movies. And so for many people, pop culture is a part of their culture. And so by talking about clients' favorite movies or TV shows or books or video games, we're learning about their culture. We're seeing the world through their eyes, and we're learning their vocabulary. We're learning the tools that they have that have been helping them so far that we can then incorporate into therapy. The truth is, for most people, for our clients, and probably for many of us therapists, for certainly true for myself, during our most difficult times, we tend to feel alone, especially when we're facing trauma or depression or anxiety. And so as a result, when we feel lonely, we might feel a lot of shame about feeling lonely and further isolate. So I want to actually differentiate between guilt and shame because these two emotions are confused sometimes. So guilt is feeling bad about a specific action. So guilt can sometimes be helpful because it can teach us what to do and what not to do. For example, guilt can teach us to be careful about what we say in an argument, because if we say something unkind, we might regret it later because it can hurt someone's feelings. Shame, on the other hand, tends to be maladaptive. Shame is feeling bad about ourselves overall as a person. And so shame tends to say things like, I am bad, I'm unlovable, I'm worthless, I'm broken, I'm not good enough. And shame researcher Brene Brown says that we deny our loneliness. We feel shame around being lonely, even when it's caused by grief, loss, and heartbreak. So think about that for a moment. When we feel lonely, even when it's caused by grief, loss, or heartbreak, we shame ourselves for feeling lonely in this experience of suffering. So in the very moment that we're in greatest need of compassion and support, we might shame ourselves for how we feel. And the less we talk about it, the more we feel it. And I think one of the reasons we shame ourselves is because most of us are used to masking. Most of us go through life with these scripts, you know, the ones I'm talking about, the hi, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm never fine. Like, I'm not fine right now. I'm going through a major anxiety attack right now, in this very moment, in this very second. My imposter syndrome is through the roof, telling me how really you should probably have hired a different presenter for this. And most of you probably have better things to do than to watch me on the screen. But that is my everyday monologue. And I think that most of us lie to ourselves and others about being fine when most of us are far from it. And what if, just like some of the fictional characters we see on TV and read about, we were to be fully transparent and authentic and honest? And rather than answering the question with, I am fine, what if we were to say, actually, I'm struggling today. How about you? Can we talk about our common experiences? How different might the world be if we were authentic? Because the truth is, going through shame and loneliness shows up as just about every mental health disorder there is. Any mental health disorder you can think of has shame and loneliness at the core of it. Whether we think of depression, trauma, addiction, personality disorders, etc., it is the shame and the loneliness of that experience that increases the symptoms. When we start sharing with other people, when we find other people who are similar, we tend to feel better, not because we want to see other people suffer, no, but because we as humans need to know that we're not alone in our experiences. We are wired for connection. We are wired for belonging. And when we know that we're not alone, that is when healing happens. And so when people feel lonely, they're more likely to avoid other people, take blame that doesn't belong to them, engage in unhealthy behaviors, including substance abuse, feel hopeless and helpless, and consider suicide. all the while claiming that they're fine when they're actually not. And I've been really interested in the idea of loneliness. Loneliness does not mean being physically alone. Loneliness means being emotionally detached from other people. It means feeling misunderstood, unseen, and unheard or devalued by other people. And I think that for so many people that we see in therapy, so many of us might realize that the individual we see is experiencing symptoms that they're experiencing or being made to feel worse because they feel alone in their experience. I see so many people sharing about their experiences, whether it's about panic attacks or other mental health symptoms. And thank you for sharing that, because the truth is, many of us are in this field because we're giving back to other people because we've learned about our own suffering. And I think that when we're able to be authentic, when we're able to acknowledge our own experiences, we're able to better help other people. And I love, again, some of the comments you're posting here about sharing your experiences, about your mental health, about some of the trauma or even feelings of shame, and now finding freedom in that. Thank you all for sharing in your comments as you are. And, and I think that for so many individuals that we see, they might maybe go to maybe even a well-intentioned family member for support, only to be told that they need to simply not think about it or not feel it or think positive, right? Or that other people have it worse. Basically, being told that their experience isn't as bad as they think it is, and being told that they need to not feel as bad as they feel. As a result, people feel very alone in their experience, and it is that loneliness that we're talking about, the kind of loneliness that can be made worse by being around other people who are not understanding or supportive. And it is that kind of loneliness that we're talking about here. So I'm referring to it as perceived loneliness. It is also referred to as social loneliness or emotional disconnection. So this kind of perceived loneliness has been found over the last couple of decades to increase cardiovascular risk factors, increase risk of Alzheimer's disease for people predisposed to Alzheimer's, increase mental health illness, mental health pathology, depression, anxiety, suicidality, assumptions of worthlessness and burdensomeness, which in themselves are risk factors for suicidality as well, increase in inflammation, chronic pain, and autoimmune issues, and increased risk of premature death. And in fact, a recent meta-analysis has been suggesting that loneliness is essentially the new smoking. A United States Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, is calling loneliness a new epidemic. And in 2020, he came out with a report stating that about 20% of emergency room visits are related to loneliness. And a few weeks ago, he stated that at this point, doctors are estimating that about 50% of Americans are experiencing loneliness. Meta-analyses have found that loneliness leads to perceived mortality risk that is as high as chronic smoking or alcohol abuse. I'm going to say that one more time. Social loneliness, so that emotional disconnection from other people, poses as high of a mortality risk as chronic smoking or alcohol abuse, not necessarily in the way that it affects our lungs or our liver, but in the way that it might shorten our lifespan and affect our heart. So much so that loneliness can spike our chronic pain, and in fact, taking certain painkillers like Tylenol or aspirin can reduce not just physical pain, but the pain of loneliness. I am not suggesting here that we should be suggesting to our clients that they take Tylenol or aspirin when they're feeling lonely. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, however, is that loneliness is a real problem that is affecting our country and majority of countries worldwide. We have seen over the last 3 years that we can meet virtually and find support and connection with other people. So we're not talking about loneliness in terms of being physically alone. But the kind of loneliness where people feel misunderstood and unseen by other people, that kind of loneliness can have a significant impact on other people's lives. But the opposite is true too. Meaningful social support can greatly reduce our physical and mental suffering.